Good evening. This is Don't Give Up Ukraine again for the 8th week. And our theme for this week is resurrection, what we thought would be very appropriate just before Easter in the Netherlands, but also in Ukraine. And my name is Ruud Meij, and together with Orissa Bila, we are doing this Don't Give Up Ukraine live stream every week at Thursday evening. So I'm very happy that we have two guests here. First of all, Anatoliy Babynskyi from UCO, and Anatoliy will introduce himself in a minute. And second, Heleen Zorgdrager from the Protestant University in Amsterdam, and she will also introduce herself. And maybe first of all, Orissa Bila. Orissa, can you say a couple of words about yourself, and then we go to Anatoliy and Heleen.
Hello, everybody. My name is Orissa Bila, and I'm a head of philosophy department in Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. I'm Ukrainian, and I'm also, my background is in theology, so today we will talk about religion and civil society, of course, which is important question for all Christians in Ukraine and in the world.
Thank you, Orissa. Anatoliy, as our first guest, would you say something about yourself, introduce yourself a bit to us and to everyone who's watching?
My name is Anatoliy Babynskyi, and I'm also Ukrainian, as Orissa, and I'm also working at the Ukrainian Catholic University. I'm a church historian, and I'm working at the Institute of Church History. And I'm teaching two courses at the university. One is about the religious life of Ukrainian diaspora, and the second is religious life in Ukraine in the global historical context. And now I'm in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, and it's quite safe here. So nice to meet you, and good evening to all.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Anatoliy. Heleen Zorgdrager, could you
Nice to meet you. My name is Heleen Zorgdrager. I'm a professor of systematic theology and gender studies at the Protestant Theological University in Amsterdam. And since 2005, I have been sent as a teacher to the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. I was teaching in the master program of ecumenical studies, and I did so over many years. So I stayed there about 3 months a year in Lviv, teaching in the university and also visiting social projects all over Ukraine. Social projects to which our church was connected. So I got to know Ukrainians, the social life, the society in Ukraine, and many churches and church life very well. And I feel deeply connected to the country and its people.
Thank you. Same for me, by the way. So this is a very special community of people we are now. I'm the only one who is not that religious educated. So I'm a typically product of the Dutch society as a secular educated philosopher. So this will be nice to have this all together. So Anatoliy, before we start, could you give us a bit of an impression? How is life in Lviv and in Ukraine today? I think would be week 8 of the war.
Yes, I'm not in Lviv now. I am in Kolomea. It's 200 kilometers from Lviv, in my parents' house with my wife and my children. But the situation here is like in Lviv, I think. Every day we hear sirens. The situation is a little bit calmer now in Ukraine, because you know that the northern parts of Kiev, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions were liberated by the Ukrainian army. So the hottest spot now is in the east and in the south. But the news are still horrible, and we are waiting for our victory, but we understand now that it will take months, I think.
Somehow, for me, we are just holding our breath, something like that. So you won in the north, and we know there will be coming something from the east, from the south. That's all, and it will be horrible. And we don't know where it will start, but I'm keeping my breath. It's heavy.
Yeah, people are tired already because of war, and I can feel it in the society now, where I'm living now. So the social depression and is quite deep already, but we still have hope, of course.
Yes, I can quite understand that. It brings us a bit, I think, to our subject from tonight. So maybe I will give the word to Orissa, because she's very much more well known in your subject, in our subject today. So Orissa, it's up to you to bring up with the opening question.
For our listeners and viewers, I will tell a few more words about Anatoliy. Anatoliy is not just researching the religious life in diaspora, but he is author of the first short book about Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in Ukraine. It's called Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in 90 Minutes, which is a popular edition. And I think this was in a certain way, unique edition for Ukrainian context. I don't remember any other books of that nature that were published about religious context, and especially about church for wide public. Ukraine is also quite religious country. First, my question will be of this. Of course, it's a religious country with prevailing number of Christians. And we say about Ukraine as an Orthodox country. To some point, it is much more Orthodox than Ukrainian Greek Catholics. But maybe, Anatoliy, you will introduce us for our audience to get to know more about how religions are represented in Ukraine, specifically what Christian denominations are there. And in that connection, because we are here, both of us belong to Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. So more specifically about what is Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, what is its difference compared to any Catholic Church and also any Orthodox Church? Is coming ahead, it's a kind of a bridge between these two. There was a long story, trying to represent Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church as a bridge between West and East. So let's talk about just the Christians in Ukraine and Greek Catholic Church, what place it takes in Ukraine as such.
Thank you, Risa, for a mention of my book, because it was translated into English just before the war, and I think and I hope it will be published in near future. It was a little bit adopted to the English audience, and I think that it will help to English-speaking people and those who are interested in the history of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church to better understand its history and identity. So speaking about the religious landscape of Ukraine, of course, Ukraine, the majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox, but we have two Orthodox churches. One is Autocephalous, an Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which they proclaimed their independence from the Moscow Patriarchate 30 years ago, but they received the Tomos of Autocephaly just 3 years ago. And we also have a huge community of Orthodox who are in the communion, and in not only in communion, but also under the jurisdiction of the Moscow Patriarch. And today, this church, there is a turbulence within this church, because a lot of faithful and a lot of priests, they reacted very negatively to that, to those, sermons and the position of the Moscow Patriarchate concerning the war against Ukraine. When we are speaking about the numbers, I think that the 70% of Ukrainians, they declare that they are Orthodox, but I think only 10% are really practicing Orthodox, because Orthodox in Ukraine is like Catholicism in Poland. It's you are Ukrainian, you are an Orthodox, so it's like more cultural identity, not always a religious one. And we also have a Catholic community. We have like 9% of Greek Catholics and 1% of Roman Catholics, and we have a quite big Muslim community in southern Ukraine and in eastern Ukraine. Tatars, mostly they are Tatars, Crimean Tatars, and we also have a very influential, but small but very influential Jewish community, and we also have I think that 3% of Ukrainian population are Protestants. They are minority, but they are very socially active now in Ukraine. Not only now, but and before the war also. So they are minority, but they are very, very active. Greek Catholics, because Risa asked me to talk a little bit about the identity and the history of Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. So Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is the biggest Eastern Catholic Church. So we have an Eastern rite, we have Eastern theology, canonical, canon law, and spiritual tradition. And we share this tradition with the Christians of Byzantine rite, like Orthodox and of Patriarchate of Constantinople, or in other Slavic countries, or in Greece, or I think that our listeners can know about that. So, but we are in communion with Rome, and this is also a part of our identity. And I think that when we are talking about the contemporary history of Ukrainian Catholic Church, so I should mention the 20th century, because during the Soviet period, our church was underground in the Soviet Union, and it existed only in diaspora. Legally, it existed only in diaspora. And during the Soviet period, it was the biggest community, the biggest underground community in the whole world. And we know what persecutions mean. We know what is suffering, because the whole 20th century was very horrible for us. And so I will stop here, because I can talk a lot about that.
Well, so you wrote this book about Greek Catholic Church in 19 minutes. If you would explain Greek Catholic Church in 19 seconds, what would be the core of the identity, what you wanted to tell us?
Sometimes our church was called like a bridge between East and West. I don't like this allegory, but there is some truth in it, because we are between East and West, North and South. So, I think that this life in between, this life between East and West, North and South, we transformed into something very unique and very productive. Because our church is, I think, is quite influential. We have only 9% in Ukraine, but our leaders, like former Patriarch Lubomir Huzar, he was trusted by the majority of Ukrainians. So he was like a moral leader of our society. So we are a minority, but very influential in different dimensions of social life. I think that also in politics and in religious life and in different charitable initiatives. So I think that this is a core of our identity, that this life in between we transformed into something productive.
I will come back to it later, because I think this is one of the, as I have seen it and I've experienced the Greek Catholic Church, and for instance the Greek Catholic Church in Yuku, this is a very, for me, a special feature of the Greek Catholic Church. But I want to switch a bit to Heleen for the moment, because Heleen, you are Protestant, you are also theologian, so in that sense. But what brings a Protestant to Lviv?
Well, the first interest of our church was to build good relationships with Eastern Christian churches. And therefore, the Ukrainian Catholic University was a great place, because there this Institute of Ecumenical Studies started under the leadership of an Orthodox historian. And of course, Greek Catholics were in the staff, and I, as a Protestant, was part of the staff. So it was already a beautiful mix, and they also built bridges to other churches by inviting church leaders, but also academics from different churches to come together and to build a platform of dialogue. And so as a Protestant, I gave my part to that. I played my role in that. But I also learned a lot about this ecumenical laboratory, which is Ukraine, this multi-confessional, rich, full of rich history and of many religious traditions coming together. I learned a lot to bring back to the Netherlands. For instance, about the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. It was, and still it is quite unknown to most of the people. So it's always the task to explain it, but also to show that there is such a church so deeply connected to the history of Ukrainian people, and with this history of underground and martyrdom, and how strong it has made the Greek Catholic Church, and how it nourishes the church today. So this was always my message to the Netherlands, to reach out to society, to fulfill this mission of helping to build Ukrainian society from principles, Christian values, also very human values like dignity, freedom, solidarity, and I have seen this throughout the 17 years now that I'm connected with the Catholic University, and how the Greek Catholic faith and traditions until today strengthen the people. Almost daily I hear these messages from Patriarch Sviatoslav Ševčuk. He records speeches from Kiev, where he stays in the midst of the war. And well, these are very spiritual speeches, and also very actual in this time, in this moment, and relevant to today, about, well, messages of hope, but also telling the truth about what happens. And he can do this because there is this church tradition that has made people strong and able to keep their dignity, and to call evil evil and good, and to be a witness in today's horrific war. Yeah, so as a Protestant, I have learned a lot. It has also spiritually enriched me. The Orthodox liturgy, of course, this is not exclusively something from the Greek Catholic Church. This is shared tradition with the other Orthodox churches, but the way the Ukrainian Greek Catholics perform the liturgy, in Utrecht there is also an active Greek Catholic parish, and from the beginning of the war I started to go there, and also there I hear the sermons, and I listen to the liturgical singing, and I feel the power of tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's talk not about the traditions, let's talk about the present time. You know, one of the things that happened really in 2014 that was really a real phenomenon, in a sense that nobody could expect, that was a close connection of religious people and religious communities with Maidan. This is Maidan, just to remind to our audience, was the movement for, it started with the protest of Ukrainian students who went against Yanukovych, who refused to follow the European direction of the development of Ukraine. And it's a civil movement of Ukrainians. The other name for this is a revolution of dignity. It's a revolution for citizens who wanted to live in a just and just society that follows the principles of the civilized world, so to say, of the solidarity, justice, and well-being. And the big role of that in that movement really belongs to church. Church was one of the opinions of the one of the opinion makers in that period. The priests and the religious people, the whole strength of religion, the ones that lies in this solidarity built through these horizontal relations between people, support, really belongs. I would like it, and it's not only about the Greek Catholic, it's also about Protestants. I think all the churches that did not belong, or that never associated, that never had this, temptation to be connected with the government or with the power, they actually were really involved in this civic movement. And today, what we see again, this is I have really good friends who were part of the evangelical and Baptist communities in Ukraine, and what I see, they are working hard, and they are on the front lines of the civic society and volunteer movements. They really, the support that they show to their fellow citizens is immense. Let's talk a little bit about this phenomenon. Why are the churches that stay aside and just keep, they kind of like, we call it a position of the pilot, yes? You're Pilatus. You just stay aside and try not to intervene. And there are churches that really kind of cannot see themselves a part of the society. Maybe we'll start with Anatoliy and then Helen.
Yes, I think that we can compare the situation with a revolution of dignity and also with a situation of Orange Revolution with the situation in Poland in 1989. When the church and the civil society were closely connected with each other. And I think that we can trace this connection and we can find the social teaching of the Catholic Church in the root of this connection. And what the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was trying to do during the 90s and at the beginning of the new millennium, we try to translate the social doctrine of the church into secular language. Our leaders always used this vocabulary of the Catholic social doctrine, using the human dignity, solidarity, subsidiarity. So we operated with those words, and we were trying to assure our society that Catholic Church, for on its part, wants to see Ukraine as a European democratic state where the human dignity is respected, and I think that connection between the civil society and the church didn't start at the moment when the revolution began. It was a long process, and it was very natural that churches like Roman Catholic and Greek Catholic Church played a huge role in those revolutions. And when we are talking about the Protestant churches, I think that they were also very socially active during the 90s and at the beginning of the new millennium. So they also have this social teaching in their churches, and you know that even the Orthodox churches, when they saw that Catholics are very socially active, Protestants are very socially active, so that made the situation in Ukraine like a competition for them. So they also try to use some instruments that Protestants and Catholics are using, and so we pushed them in that direction a little bit. So we don't have such situation in Russia because there is no competition, there is no religious plurality in Russia. So, and this is I think the huge difference between us and them. This one of the differences. We have also a difference in our political cultures, but this is another topic. But I think that this plurality, this very this religious landscape, which is where we have different churches competing between each other. So that played a very good and a very important role for the democracy in Ukraine also.
As for the Protestant churches in Ukraine, I see it a little bit different. So I agree with most of what you are saying, but I know from the Protestant theologians that for them Maidan was much more of a turning point for their churches as such. Before they were socially active more in a diaconal way, so doing good for the poor, for people with disabilities, but not so much translated into a responsibility for politics and for the state. And because of their history that they were also persecuted churches and had a very inwardly spirituality. So the kingdom of God is not here on earth, but it is after this life. And due to younger theologians who engaged very actively in Maidan, this social teaching developed in the Protestant churches, and they connected also more to the Greek Catholics and to others in the country. So yeah, I hear them always saying, for us, Maidan was really a turning point where we as churches realized we have to take our responsibility in the state. And of course, there were always pioneers ahead, but as churches, this meant a lot for them. So yeah, and church and civil society are closely connected, and churches have moral leaders And yeah, this is also from the 90s, where the churches were the main actors in civil society, and only in the last 10 years, and especially after Maidan, the civil society has so strongly developed in Ukraine that church and civil society are not always on the same page. There are also tensions between more liberal secular society and churches. But what I see now in the war is that the people are united, and church and civil society are united. So this all the differences or tensions that have been there also between the churches, they vanish, and now the priority is to hold together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Helen, you just said about this turning point that Protestant community experienced in Maidan, that they switched their point of view, not just from internal work, from the charity work, into more like giving up this political dimension of the church, also being present in the civil society in general, more in a wider sense. But from your perspective, since you've been there for many years, you also witnessed what happens in Maidan, what happened after Maidan. Is there any special impact that church has for the society in relation to the concept of dignity, of service, of, we understand how church benefits from the society, but does the society benefit from the church and from religion in that sense?
Very good question, and difficult to formulate an answer. So well, it has very much to do with what dignity is, and that dignity has to do with persons as images of God, which is a spiritual quality, and which cannot in everything be translated into political or social categories. Well, to make a direct jump to now and to the sermons and spiritual speeches in war times, what I hear church leaders say is, let us be protected from hate. Let not hate conquer us. Let us remain in the love of Christ. So, because hate is so much natural in this situation, but let us keep our dignity, and we can keep our dignity if we keep praying, if we are aware of this spiritual dimension in our lives, because it is not natural. It is natural to hate. It is natural to take revenge. It is natural. But to keep a dignity, because if this is what I hear a church leader say, if we do not keep the dignity, and if we do not stay in the love of Christ, it means that we have lost. So the victory is not only the victory of protecting our country and defend it against the enemy, but it is also about keeping ourselves dignified and free. And this is so much of a challenge in the situation, but I think this is a contribution of churches to society to keep this spiritual dimension alive. And now I illustrated in the quality of dignity and freedom, but it might be possible to illustrate it also in other dimensions. The love for one's neighbor. I presented a paper in a conference on this text that Jesus says, "Greater love has no one than the one who gave his life for his friends." And in the theology of the Russian Orthodox Church, this is very much militarized. So it is the soldier who gives life for his fatherland. That is greater love has no one than who sacrificed himself for all the interests of the fatherland. Even if the fatherland is imperialistic, you gave your life. You have to give your life. And then I hear a Ukrainian church leader on the same Bible text, on the same gospel text. And he says it is about how we in this time of war look after one another, take care of our neighbor who is face to face in a personal relationship with us. And of course, also the military men and women in service, they are also giving their lives for the one they love. But these are very concrete ones. These are their families, relatives, friends. They see faces. It is not the abstract idea of a fatherland, Holy Russia, the Russian world, or Ruski Mir, or whatever. It is very concrete. And I think this is also spiritual. Being spiritual is not going into abstractions, but it is being very concrete. This is the person I am responsible for. And if the situation is like this, then from love, I am willing to give my life for my neighbor, this very special person. I know who it is, and I know who this person needs me.
I would like to add a little bit, maybe. May I?
Sure.
Yeah, because when we're talking about the Protestant communities, and I would like to add that I think that they are ready to give back to the society a lot, because I feel this. But I read a very nice text, a very interesting text by the Protestant theologian Roman Solovey a few days ago, and it was called Theology after Bucha. And there were many questions in that text. I think that a half of that text is questions, and I think that and he asked himself how he can pray with people who lost their relatives, who were raped, and so on. And he answered that he doesn't have answers right now, but I think that we are now on the right direction when we are putting such questions to us, because our society is waiting for us a spiritual support, a charitable support, and I think that we should think about that right now. And I think that Catholic community and Protestant community, we are in a little bit better situation than Orthodox now, because they are still quarreling about the canonical issues. How can they get united, and how their relations with the Moscow Patriarchate should be. So this is not right questions during this war, and because our society is waiting some other things from us as from Christians.
These challenges are real. I think I read an article, your article about this, and there was something in there. Someone, maybe it was the theologian that you just mentioned. He said maybe we need a new theology. And so I think I read about it. And so from my perspective, I was always thinking about one of the greatest moral philosophers of the United States and of the world is John Rawls. And John Rawls was fighting in the Philippines in World War II. And then he experienced these atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was for him the decision. And he made it very, let's say, considerate in the sense that he said, well, if God makes this possible, that can't be my God. That can't be God at all. So it made him a secular, so to say. And so I think that I can imagine that it, for people who are in Bucha or who are witnessing Bucha, including us, so to say, who think about this is also a very deep question about what is the meaning of religion itself when this happens to us. And so these terrible things, so to say. And that's, I think maybe you are referring to that too. That's actually where we what our challenge is to find an answer to that question.
Yeah, I have a PhD student. He is a PhD student of the university in Amsterdam, but he lives in Lviv because he is also teaching in Lviv. It is Stanislav Bondar. And he wrote an essay, and it is published now on the website of our university. And this is exactly about the question, how can we theologize after Bucha? And he wrote, well, here I sit in the midst of this horror, and okay, my research should be on dignity, but I cannot think about one word to write down, because how can I write about dignity in this situation? But then he says, well, where the people are in the midst of despair and hell, who will give them hope? Where does hope begin? Jürgen Moltmann said, well, hope begins in the deepest of crisis. So at the cross, at the crucifixion on Golgotha, that was the place where in the end hope was born. So if we do not expect anything at all, then God might begin something new. That is faith. And he said, well, I understand that this is our task for Ukrainian theologians. We have to witness hope. And how do we, that is the question now for theology, how do we witness the kingdom of God in the midst of this destruction? How do we witness paradise in the midst of this destruction? So he ends the letter with, I feel morally obliged to continue and to complete my research on dignity, to write specifically on dignity in a theological way. And he ends with, I am an ambassador of Bucha, and we are all ambassadors of Bucha, to be called witnesses and ambassadors of Bucha. What we witness there, the war crimes, the end of humanity. In there we witness, if there is no one to witness anymore the crimes, then humanity is lost. If we as humans keep on witnessing, then there is hope for humanity. So it begins deep down, and it is almost like with empty hands. No.
Isn't that, let's say, how do you say that? Isn't that not a bit too nice? So in a sense what happens, and you say, okay, I understand that. So this is a moment of new beginning, a moment where we choose the word resurrection as theme for this meeting. And I always think about the Greek Catholic Church as very connected to the fate of Ukraine as a nation. That's all. I think it's not a coincidence that the Greek Catholic Church has basically his capital, if I may say so, in Lviv, and the birth of the Greek of the Ukrainian nation is also Lviv and eastern and western part of Ukraine. So isn't there something in this idea of, let me switch also to this theme, Easter, resurrection, in its connection between Bucha, resurrection, and the creation of a nation, the nation of Ukraine. And there's something what connects these terrible moments with the Greek Catholic Church and with, let's say, the narrative of resurrection. Maybe you have some words
I can start, but I let you, Anatoly, speak on the Greek Catholic Church then. Because thinking about the topic of resurrection, I think it's much too early. And Easter is a drama of events, and resurrection is only a glimpse, a little bit of sunlight in the beginning of a new day, but nothing more. It is so soft and tender, and as a whisper, it is not spectacular. So Easter, as I understand it, is it is a drama of betrayal on the Holy Thursday, which is today in the West. It is about suffering, about torture, about death of an innocent victim. And this is what is happening in Ukraine today. And then it is the Holy Saturday, and that is in the midst of death, attend to the wounds and the trauma, and just sit there and cry and with no perspective at all. And this is a long Holy Saturday. It's not just one day. It can be a deep, dark passage for people before a glimpse of resurrection might break through. So for me, resurrection, it is of course about, coming alive, revive, but the literal word of Pesach and Pascha, it is a passage. There is a passage, and this passage is not a broad and wide passage and with glittering lights. It is like a small dark tunnel, perhaps, and there is this one ray of sunlight and nothing more. So resurrection is hope, and it is God beginning something new, but it's before resurrection, there is a lot of, just attending to the wounds. And attending to the wounds, perhaps in attending to the wounds, there is already a beginning of resurrection.
So maybe Anatoliy, you should start, but you actually started, Heleen. So maybe you can say something about this, Anatoliy.
Yes. I can share maybe with my own feelings. Frankly speaking, it's a little bit hard to speak about Easter joy now in Ukraine, and I'm a little bit afraid how we will celebrate this Easter, and because we do not allow ourselves to feel joy now, because we know how many people are suffering, and I will also a little bit afraid because we don't know what Putin is thinking. He likes, to bomb us on our feasts during our day, Independence Day. There is no sacred things for him. But I also like to share that I think that during these days we reread the gospel in a new way. And I talked to one priest, and he told me, I feel how this mystery of the cross came closer to us now. He told me that he never read this text from the gospel in such way how he's reading now. And I can give you an example about maybe not about the Easter, but about the nativity of Christ. In Ukraine is a very joyful feast, nativity, yeah, and it's like a fairy tale. A small child, ships around, and very sweet music, and now when we are reading these texts, we see that it wasn't like that. Mary gave birth in a dirty place. They were refugees. So a lot of children were killed during the nativity, so this meaning came closer to us, the real meaning and the real story. So of course, all this is joyful, but at the same time, horrible things were happening. And I think that this war like made everything upside down, and we are rethinking now all these texts, and I think that we have no way out, but we have to, you know, to develop this new theology that we were talking during the previous question, because I think that this experience is very rich. It's not easy, but I think that we have a lot of work ahead.
Would you say, Anatoly, that this being in the war, actually, maybe we have to go back to 2014 or even earlier, is something what changed the Greek Catholic Church in this sense you're just sharing with us?
I think the whole society was changed. I can't speak particularly about the Greek Catholic Church, because we are an integral part of this society, and we live together. And I can tell that we have any unique experience like the whole society.
It is contextual theology that is now developing in the midst of suffering, and it also started in Maidan. The theology of Maidan was also an attempt to articulate a contextual theology in the midst of struggle, and now the struggle is even more intense. And I'm sure that Ukrainians will celebrate Easter because, well, they will go to their churches, and they will hear the gospel of resurrection. And at the same time, I think how many people will cry when they start singing that Christ has risen and that he trampled to death with his dead, and that from the graves the dead people will revive, will live again, that he gave life to them. So I cannot imagine that Easter hymn will be sung without many tears.
Agree. You know, I also one thing that always struck me about this difference between West and East in the liturgical tradition. Western tradition is about suffering. It's about this human part of Jesus who became a real human and really suffered like human. And the Eastern tradition always emphasizes the resurrection, that we are, when you see the liturgy in the Byzantine tradition, people are always standing. They almost never knee, because only for the exception of the Lent, right? These 40 days before the resurrection, before the Easter, that we really have this kneeling tradition. It's a tradition of forgot the English word, rozkayania. Maybe you can help. Repentance, right? But normally we stay because we are raised to the dignity. And I'm thinking maybe what is really, where is the resurrection in Ukraine right now? Where is the spirit of resurrection? Is actually we stay in the dignity. We keep staying in the dignity, and because we Christians see the story of Jesus from not as it's developing. We already know the end. Jesus resurrected. Jesus raised from dead, and so it gives us the hope that we will stand with Jesus. We have this strength, being with God, praying, supporting each other, and actually facing God's face in the faces of our neighbors, of the people, of our fellow citizens. And sometimes we have to look in the eyes of our enemies and to understand what is their human, because this is the real, it's not really the people from the other planet who came to us. These are also people, and we actually will have to have this is a painful moment that you have to acknowledge that all this is a part of human nature, and our killers are also human beings. We will have to really think of this after the war is over, and we still have to think it even now, because we are facing this existential challenge of everyday life. So I think the resurrection is there already for us as a certain horizon, a certain perspective of expectation, and in that sense, my heart will be broken if we are bombed on the day of the Easter, but still, I really hope that the Easter is more than just a day. It's also a moment. It's a moment of living. It's a moment of existential experience. It's a moment that takes you forward, and in that sense, I hope Ukraine won't give up the resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say that especially now, Orisa, that the resurrection has in these circumstances, in this war, in this moment, in 2022, had this special meaning, so to say? I remember very well Easter, where I spent with a friend in Lviv, and we spent basically the whole day on the table with a lot of nice things to eat and a lot of nice things to drink. This was our Easter, with my good friend Bogdan Pankiewicz, and I loved it very much. But it's totally different from what we are talking about, of course, now. And this make this Easter, if I understand you should make this Easter this resurrection something unforgettable in a sense. Because of the circumstances and it's even this moment of this Easter that, as you say, your heart will break if bombs will fall on Easter, on resurrection. But it is also this special moment to cherish, so to say, just to step back and to let in these, because to be honest, if I think about what's happening now in Ukraine, and I think of the dignity of the other, I said bullshit with the dignity of the other. We have to win this war, period. So that's also human, so to say. And this is a moment that you say, okay, but let's put this into brackets for one day or 3 days or something like that. So I'm not a theologian. I'm very used to Easter, but not so. But is that actually what you're saying, Orisa?
I don't know if I understood you properly. Maybe I will say this way: we have to, if we have no right to give up on the hope. That is the Easter for us. Easter is the moment of solidarity, of life rising over evil and over death. And in this sense, it's our only choice. We have no right to give up. Jesus was risen from the dead, and we know this is possible. So for us, Easter is a moment of truth. It's also a moment of the future. So if there is a future, if there is something to hope for, this is this perspective of Easter.
So we're almost at 9:30 or 10:30 in Ukraine. So I think it will be nice if I'll give you some last words, would you say, okay, this would be my message to Easter from all the people who are living or listening, all our audience who will listen or see this live stream afterwards, or so what would you say to them? Let me start with you, Heleen.
I wish that all Ukrainians can celebrate Easter, Pesach or Pascha in any way, either in churches or at a breakfast table or at a Pesach meal, and that they remember how God once liberated the people from Egypt, from this evil Pharaoh, and that at the next instance he liberated Jesus, the innocent victim, from the death by the powerful of his days, so that God will be able now to resurrect Ukraine.
Thank you. Orissa, what would you say?
You know, it took I will continue with what Helen said. It took Jews 40 years to go through this desert. And it was not 40 years that this way takes, you know, it takes really a short time. But it has, the mentality has to change. You know, the people that went slaves have to come to the new country as the free people, as the people with a different perception of who they are and what they want to build. And I think for Ukrainian nation, it's a terrible, it's the worst thing to happen, of course, this war. But I hope that it will also be a moment of solidarity, of reunion, and also of you know, of really bringing ourselves, you know, understanding what really valuable things are. What are we really in our core, and being able, you know, when your traditions are not anymore traditions, but the lively part of your everyday practice, and that is something that we have chance now to experience, to go through. So this is also a moment of our own repentance, but not probably repentance is not a good word. It's a moment of this clearing, of this you know, of transformation that started in 2014. It's a terrible moment, of course. It's like with Jesus, that he goes through the blood and pain and death. But again, there is a resurrection, and let us not forget about this.
Thank you very much. Anatoliy, to you, what would your message for Easter be?
First of all, I would like to say to thank all of you and to the whole world for the support of our country. You know, when the war started, my older son, he told me that he was very afraid, and it was so hard to explain what is happening to our children. And he was afraid, but then he saw some news on TV, and he said to me, you know, Father, I see that a lot of countries support us. So I'm not so afraid as I was before. And this is what he said to me. It was very, you know, joyful for me. And we feel now that we are not alone. And, you know, when we are talking about this loneliness and resurrection, I think that we can trace this connection that we are not alone because Christ resurrected. And I think that, you know, the fear of death is the fear of loneliness. And when we believe, when we know that Christ resurrected, we know that we are not alone in this world now. And as a country, we are not alone. And we are very thankful to the whole world for this support. And as a Christians, we are not alone because Christ resurrected. So, and there is no death. So thank you for having me with you.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. I was thinking of, I was also thinking what makes me think about Easter and a resurrection. Now, there is a little girl of 3 years old running to my home, and she doesn't know anything about war. She experienced some, but she couldn't explain it. And that, for me, it is her who kept something alive, what I wouldn't have had if she wasn't here, so to say. So she is, for me, well, I think it, from US theology, it makes no sense at all. But when it comes to hope and it comes to something like resurrection, she's running to my home. So now, so for me, Easter is dedicated to her, I would say.
That's everything. That's everything. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Good. I want to thank you very much for being here. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope you enjoyed it very much. I hope our audience will enjoy it and look again as what we will of course put it at the YouTube, so people can look at it afterwards, so to say. Again, Heleen, thank you very much for being here. Anatoly, thank you very much for being here. Well, Orissa, thank you very much for being here. Okay, and we'll meet again somewhere, definitely. Thank you very much.